Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to discuss an interesting topic, and this will deal with combination of various technologies. So stay tuned, and I think we'll have fun. So about 3 days ago, I received an email, of course, from Open AI because I kind of signed up for the beta version. So as you can see, this email came out on March 7th. The ChatGPT API, the model called GPT 3.5 Turbo, or you can also use this as well, is ready for prime time. It's ready to use, and it also gave me the pricing and all that. So I thought, why not just try to check it out and see how it works. So this is like the real deal. This is the real ChatGPT's model. And with that, they actually also opened up the Whisper API, which is dealing with the transcription of audio and video. But again, today we're not going to discuss that. We're going to discuss the ChatGPT API that is out there. That means you can literally put this API into action in your program. Okay, so what we're going to do is I have already built a simple application using various technologies. And let me describe those technologies. First of all, I used Springboot, jQuery, Thymeleaf, Java, of course, and of course HTML and CSS. So it's a bit combinations of various technologies just to show you that you can really build the pretty rock solid, user-friendly, and really nice looking applications using the latest and greatest technology that's dealing with AI. Okay. So before I get to the details, if you're not familiar with my channel, I really humbly suggest that please go ahead, take a look at some of the videos that I have. I talk about all different types of technologies like REST APIs, to Spring Boots, to Java, to Angular, to React, and whatnot, so on. And there's Next.js as well. If you have seen my previous video, which is right here, I have actually talked about and showed you how to build an application. So this video basically talks about creating a simple chatbot application using Open AI's model. And of course, I used React on this thing. And to be exact, I use Next.js, which is kind of like a wrapper of React. So please take a look at it if you have not. But this will be different today. I mean, we will build a chatbot, but this would be extremely powerful using OpenAI's ChatGPT, the latest and greatest model, which is this guy right here, GPT 3.5 Turbo. So before we start, I will really humbly suggest, if you have not subscribed my channel, please do subscribe and hit that like button, and also hit the bell icon so that if there's a new video, you get notified right away. Okay, so let's get started with the good stuff. The very first thing you want to do is, of course, you want to go to OpenAI, and this first thing you want to do is, of course, create an API key. If you already have an API key, you can skip this. If you don't, what you want to do is click on Product, click on Overview. It'll take you to this site, and you can go to For Developers, and you can kind of get started. And then voila, it tells you to sign up, and of course, it's free to sign up. So go ahead, sign up. Right, so that's the very first thing you want to do. I already signed up, as you know. That's why I got the email, and already also signed up for the beta version of this. So once you log in, you would see something like this. You'll have your login thing. Then you want to go straight to View API Keys. That's what I went. That's what this is, and just create a new secret key. And make sure you make a copy. You can't see this whole thing, but this is will be like a long key. So that's the key you're gonna need in order for you to use the OpenAI's ChatGPT model. All right, and the next step is, if you want to use my code, the very first thing you want to do is, again, you want it to have two software. One is Eclipse, the other one is JDK. Now, of course, if you don't have to use Eclipse, if you're already familiar with Java and Java IDEs, you can use any other tools, like your Intel IDEA, that's also fine, or any other tools that you like that can take care of the Spring Boot type applications. But for simplicity, I like Eclipse. It's open source, so you can go with this as well. So go to this site, and all of these links I'll put it in the description below, so you don't have to kind of save it. It will be there. So you go to this site, and you are interested in this one, not that one. That's just for plain Java. This is for Eclipse IDE for enterprise Java and web developers, because you want it to do web. And depending on your platform, you can pick your suitable ones and go ahead. It's just going to be a zip file type thing, or in other platforms probably going to be in a tar-z. Just go ahead and follow the instructions to unzip it, and then by default this will come with the Java, but that's the Java version we don't want. We actually want the latest version of the JDK. That's why I would suggest go to the Open JDK 19. That's the latest stable version, 1902. Go there and go ahead, get the version that you need, whether you're Linux, Mac, or Windows, right? In my case, I was on Windows, so I downloaded this. So, and then, once you have Eclipse, once you have JDK, go ahead, unzip those two under whatever directory that you like. I typically unzip them on C, and I'll show it to you in a second. So this is where I unzipped my Eclipse. As you can see, it's in C, Eclipse new, and this is what the list of files would look like, right, once you unzip it. And the Open JDK, of course, I unzipped it in this directory, C JDK 19, and that's where all the files are. And of course, it's always a good idea to use a Java home environment variable, which will help you in the long run. So your Java home would be C :JDK-19, but that's in my case, this directory. Now, why do you need the JDK 19, and how do I tell Eclipse to use it? And this is what I'll tell you in a second. If you go back to Eclipse and open this INI file, eclipse.ini, open it in a Notepad, WordPad, or whatever text editor that you like, you'll see this VM will have an entry with some existing, long path that Eclipse has. Instead of that, you can actually specify any JVM that you want, any Java that you like. So here I installed my JDK 19 on this directory. So I just basically said, hey, go ahead, look at the java.exe in this directory. So go ahead, do that. Wherever you installed it, put that directory in there, including the bin. And one thing to note is it's not a / a /. So make sure you put that as well. Okay, so now that's all good. What you want to do is, it's time for some action. Then you open up your Eclipse using the exe, using this guy right here. That's your in Windows. Of course, in other platform, you just follow the instruction. So this is how it should look like. Next step would be to check out the code. So you will go to File and Import and expand this JIT, project from JIT, next, clone URI, next, and of course I already have it on the clipboard, so it automatically filled it out. And I'll put this link in the description below so you'll have it. Next, and then of course choose the default main branch, and I'm gonna put it on the directory that I like, which I typically like to put this thing on. And you just put whatever you want to put your projects, and then hit next. And at this point, it only gives you 3 options: Eclipse project, or new project, or a general project. I don't like any one of these because I'm gonna have to import this as a Maven project. So I'm just going to skip this and just get out of this. Then you want to import this project as a Maven project. So import and expand Maven, existing Maven projects, next, and just browse to the directory that you have your project in. And there's mine right here. And then you will find this pom.xml. Just hit next, or finish rather. And voila, there you go. There's a project, and expand. It should automatically compile and everything if you have followed all the steps that I mentioned using the JDKs and the Eclipse. So let's go ahead and run it and see how it works. Now there's one thing that you have to make sure before running it is that if you recall, you got your API keys, and you need to make sure that you set your environment variables with that API key. Now, what would be the name of the environment variable? It would be this. We'll come back and talk about the code in a second, but your name of the environment variable would be this. Open AI underscore demo underscore API underscore key. So if you set that properly in the environment variable, this program would work right, after you check out from JIT and compile and run it. Now, of course, on the flip side, you can also hard code the API key right here. This is just a string. That will also work, but I wouldn't suggest it. That's not a good practice. You want to put that in somewhere on your environment variable. And I already have it set, so I don't need to worry about it. I can just run it. All right, so let's go ahead and run it. This is a Springboot application. Just find out your ChatGPT application.java, right click, and you can just run it. And as you can see, it's running. Voila, it's all started, all good. Then of course go ahead and bring up a web browser and type http://localhost. And there we go. There's that ChatGPT. And as you could see that this is a text area, and of course you can ask any questions, and this will call the ChatGPT API, that the GPT Turbo, the brand new one that just came out 3 days ago, and it will literally do the exact same thing that you do when calling the ChatGPT. So let's go ahead and try. So how about, can you write a simple Python code for tic-tac-toe? Let's see if it does it. Okay, it's processing, as you could see, and let's see what it does. It's thinking, and it took a while, but as you could see, here's the question that I asked, and sure, here's a simple tic-tac-toe game in Python. It literally wrote the whole code. Nice, isn't it? All right, and I can ask a follow-up question. Well, let's ask another question. This was code related, but let's do just another completely different type of question. Show me some list of questions that may come in the interview for a genetic counselor. Let's just see what it does. And there it is. The question is the answer, and it pretty much listed a whole bunch of, not sure if it's true or not, right or not, but give me an answer. That's good enough for now. So that's all nice and good. Let's dig into the code and see how this whole thing is working. So as any Spring Boot applications, you will see there is the main application right here, and then there's a controller that connects and talks to the service class. So these are kind of like the main driving force of this entire application. And then of course the rest of them are more or less kind of like the helper classes. So what happens is, as soon as we launch the application, of course the application wants the Spring Boot, and it also uses the Thymeleaf, which is right here. There's only one file, index.html, and this is what the main renderer is. As you could see, that it is nothing but a whole bunch of HTML to show, of course, the top and the bottom. So this entire menu item and icons and blah 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 blah, and this bottom piece of a form with the text area. So that's what this is. And then your Thymeleaf comes in right here. As you would see that your form is tied to this specific bean, and based on the bean it pulls out information, and of course this text area is tied to this field. This is th field. This is how you declare the Thymeleaf and prompt. And this uses combination of Spring Boot, Thymeleaf, and also jQuery. So the form that gets submitted, it is not like the standard Spring Boot submission, because or the Thymeleaf submission. Typically what would happen is in a standard Spring Boot web application, you would submit a form and it would go to the server side and it would refresh the page. I have not done it this way. There's a reason behind it. Of course, I wanted to have it look like a single page application, which it is a single page application. It doesn't flicker the screen, doesn't send anything to the server to refresh. Well, I'll take it back a little bit. It does send stuff to the server, but in the backend, in an AJAX call. So that's where the jQuery comes in. So there's a jQuery piece to it as well. So again, it's a mix of Spring Boot, Thymeleaf, jQuery, HTML, CSS. All right. So as soon as you submit a form, which is kind of this text area has all this information, and you hit submit, this button right here, what happens is there's this little hook that I added, as you will see, that handle click. What is this? Where is this coming from? Well, it doesn't look like there's nowhere you can find this, but of course there is a hidden JavaScript piece right here where it loads those functions from. So if you go to that script, you will see that there's this handle click right here, and this is where it takes care of that. Hey, the form, whenever someone in that forms button does a click, go ahead, run all of this. All this is doing is basically disabling the button and shows that wait cursor that you saw, the little processing with the warning spinning thing. So that is nothing but a jQuery modal dialog. It's a very simple thing, just puts that thing in there with the loading GIF, and the loading GIF is right here, and it's got a height and width and all that effects in there too. That kind of makes it a little cooler, slide and fade. So it basically does that, show the weight, and then here it basically makes the AJAX call where it submits the entire form, and on success, that means once the AJAX call submits the form and gets a result, that result is basically then fed into the top portion of the document where it actually renders the output. That's where you see all the answers. And then at the end of the day, of course, it hides the progress bar when everything's done, resets the form, enables the button back. It's very simple. Concept is very simple, even though it does a lot of things. Now let's get into the Java code. Once it submits the form, where does it go? It typically goes to the controller. That's this standard Springboot controller, right? In the controller, this is actually kind of done a little bit tricky way. This controller not only is a Springboot controller, but it is also a REST controller. So this piece of it right here helps it renders the page the first time, right? You go to the localhost 8080, it basically just says, hey, set the homepage takes. That's where you get to see this big, nice set of information. And then it basically says that make sure you add this bean. This is the bean that we're going to use to collect all the form information, right? And then this piece is just added. Basically, it kills the session, like starts a fresh session. What that basically does, if you want to see it, if I just go straight here, it not only clears everything that you see here, it also kind of clears everything out on the session. It doesn't keep track of all of the, it basically starts from a clean slate. It doesn't keep track of any of the chats that has been done, which can be helpful sometimes. So this piece kind of works like a normal controller, but this piece right here, once the forms is submitted, it doesn't work like a normal form submission that would happen in a Springboot in a normal controller. That's where I mentioned about REST controller. This method kind of works like a REST API. So from jQuery, when you're submitting a form using this /chat URL, it gets all those information, but it returns it as a JSON object or a JSON format with the response. So that's where this thing comes handy. Now, where does it do all the processing? Well, it does all the processing right here. As you can see, there's a service, and service is defined right here, and got only one method, parse unstructured data. So let's go in there, and it passes, of course, the data is nothing but whatever was, question that was asked, and you will see that it literally prepares for an HTTP API, REST API call to Open API, of course. So here it is. It prepares the header, including this is the authentication. That's where you would need the key, and that's where it gets the key from. Then, of course, it prepares the message. Now, how do I know how to set the message? Well, there are these helper classes that you see: message, request, response, and bean. Of course, bean is just takes care of the title and the prompt. So that's just the helper of the Thymeleaf. But these three are literally helping with the REST API call to the Open API, right? And I'm using standard normal Java's record class for all of this. So this is like an object that would, and it's a read-only object. ChatGPT message takes a role and a content. The request is where you send the request. It accepts a model and a message, and also an overloaded constructor that you can just pass a message because it already knows what to call for the model, which is this is where the GPT 3.5 Turbo that is where we get to make sure this is calling the ChatGPT's interface. Okay, and then the response is got to be in this format. So response in this IDE object created, choices, usage, and the choice is nothing but a list of GPT choice, which is nothing but this, index, message, reason, and message is the same message that we use kind of here, is a role and contact. Now how the heck do I know all this? I don't. I literally went and looked at their documentation, right? So if you go look at their documentation, this is not the one. If you go here, so this is the documentation, right? If you go to this site right here, that's where they have the ChatGPT's GPT-3.5 Turbo's documentation. Here it literally tells you this is how you send the message. The message has to be in this specific format, role and system, like different role types, and then of course your messages, and then this is the response format. So I literally took that and came out with my list of turned that JSON into my list of Java objects, the record objects. That's how I know. So there's nothing fancy about it other than just looking at the documentation and kind of like decoding it, deciphering it, and just use the classes as such. So anyway, once you make the call, REST template call, get the response, which comes to this response object, and of course the response object where you have the message is nothing but you call the choices. Get now is nothing but choices, basically get this thing. That's an array list, as you could see, and get your first response, and then call the message and basically get the content, and that's where your response is. That's what it returns. So that's pretty much it, and it only returns it if everything's good and nice to go. All right, then that message comes back, as you could see, as the current chat. And of course, another thing I have to do is if you go look at this interface right here, you will notice that it keeps the chat cumulative until you refresh the page, right? So I have to make sure that I keep track of all the list of chats. So that's what this is. So I basically keep track of that in a session attribute called current chat, and that's what this little mumbo jumbo going on here, basically getting that response back and setting it, concatenating with the previous chat, and then basically setting it back to that session variable. But in the response, it only needs to response to the current chat. So that's what this is doing, and that's it. It's pretty simple. I mean, the way this thing works, but as long as you follow the right documentation and the process, it should just work as is without any doubt. So that's about it. I mean, that's how this whole thing works, and it is extremely capable, and it also demonstrates how you can use the power of Java, Springboot, Thymeleaf, jQuery, all in the same bucket, and come up with an application that is extremely presentable. So that's all for today, and let's see what we discussed so far. So in a nutshell, basically you download the Open JDK, you download the Eclipse, and make sure you configure the JDK with the Eclipse, and then you go ahead and check out the ChatGPT from JIT, and make sure you create the Open AI account and get the API key. Now, one may ask that, of course, this may cost money. Actually, yes or no, because initially, if you just create a free Open AI account, you are eligible for a evaluation period, and from that period, you get certain amount of money that you could use. That's free, actually. So initially, it is free, so you don't really need anything. You can literally get the account and then create the key. So anyway, after you have the key, make sure you set this environment variable, and then all you got to do is, after checking out from JIT, compile and run and build, and then test with your browser. Go to the site, and you should be able to run the ChatGPT-like chatbot, and that will answer any of your questions, including writing code and anything else. The same thing that ChatGPT does. So that's all for today. If this video helped you and added different types of skill to your bag of skill set, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe, hit the like button, and of course hit that bell icon so that you get notified for the next videos to come. And do send me messages or add comments and let me know what type of video do you want to see in the future. Thanks. Have a great day. Bye now.